So continuing on our self-transformation course, tonight we're on session 4, which is the yoga and practice, philosophy and practice for yoga, and it's Buddhi Yoga Part 1. So there are 4 components of that, and this is the first part which we're looking at tonight, which is Karma Yoga. I'll just do a recap from last week. Okay, so last week we looked at the 3 gunas, which are the forces of nature, materiality, and all of the universe is driven by it at all levels. So it's macrocosmic and microcosmic. So in the human being, it's within us, how we think, how we feel, how we behave, and also the subtler realms of nature are driven by it as well. So in a sense, while we're in manifestation, these components known as Rajasic, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, which is the passionate, if you like, for Rajasic, Tamasic is inertia, and Sattvic is the balance and harmony. So these 3 components we looked at in depth, and they can be expressed in various ways in how we behave. So in our food, you can have types of Rajasic, which is really hot and spicy. If you eat that quite a lot, it'll, really wind you up, so to speak. Like there was some guy who did an experiment on eating McDonald's for a whole month. It didn't go well for him. That's what you would call very Rajasic food. So, and then there's yajna or sacrifice. So you can make a sacrifice of your own self, which can be for personal gain, or it can be the wrong sacrifice at the wrong time. There's charity, so giving for the sake of giving, which would be sattvic. But if you're giving to be acknowledged for your giving, that would be rajasic, because you want some outcome from it. So all of these other types of behavior in terms of how we think, how we act, what we understand, what is happiness for us, all of these relate to these 3 gunas. So with understanding, for example, or happiness, and from a Rajasic point of view would be where I'm going to get something that I want ultimately right here, right now, but it won't last. And a sattvic point of view would be, well, it's a more deeper understanding and insight of happiness that we're not too worried about if it comes or goes. So all of these aspects we looked at last week, and it is online if you want to go and have another look at it on our YouTube channel. Okay. Rightio. So what I want to just have a kind of look at initially is in the theosophical framework, we have a human being has 7 components. And these correspond to aspects or teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, as well as in the Gospel of John. So the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, which is an Indian epic, and it's the 6th book in that epic. And essentially, it typifies a battle between 2 families of cousins, which symbolize positive and the negative, the light and the dark, as it were. And they're fighting over the possession of the kingdom. So essentially, the story is an analogy for what goes on in a human being, between our struggle between what is right and what is wrong, between what is best and what is not good. So it's essentially representative of manifestation or prakriti at our own human level, the psycho-somatic complex in the whole human being, that we have to struggle, and that life without struggle is meaningless. So it helps us to understand how to live, what to do in any particular time. And there are key characters in the Bhagavad Gita in that story. So the blind king, he essentially rules the kingdom for the Kauravas, who are the negative, representing the negative aspect of manifestation. And he is blind in the sense that his 100 sons rule the kingdom, which symbolizes we think we are the rulers of this world, of our body, but it's really all our desires and everything driving us. We're at the whims and mercy of our material nature. Then you have in the story Sanjaya, who is the charioteer of the blind king, and he has the gift of clairvoyance and clairaudience, and he narrates the story to the king about what's happening on the battlefield between the two opposing armies, two families. Arjuna, who's on the Pandavas, he's the hero on the positive side, representing the positive nature. He represents our soul or individuality. So he represents us in our life, in our incarnation, about figuring out how to live, because he actually doesn't, he's a great warrior, but he asks Krishna, who represents spirit, his guide, to help him in the quest for knowing what is right and what is dharma, how to live. Because the representative from the Kauravas, both him and Arjuna went to ask Krishna for advice. So his name was Durudana, stood at the head of Krishna, and Arjuna basically sat at the feet of Krishna. So Krishna was sleeping. So when he woke up, the first person he saw was Arjuna at his feet. So he gave Arjuna the first choice in terms of asking for some advice. So Arjuna asked, I would like you to be my guide and charioteer to help me in my quest and how to live, which is essentially what we're doing, right? Because it's the battlefield of Dharma, about how do we live in our life. And Durudana was at his head, and he asked for all the weapons he could, all of Krishna's weapons, which symbolizes quantity and quality. So Arjuna opted for quality, Durudana opted for quantity. So they were both happy. They both got what they wanted. So the story starts essentially where Arjuna and all the opposing forces, representing all of human nature, lust, greed, avarice, revenge, the whole shebang, because this part of the Mahabharata in the Gita comes after many, many other epics and stories that have come to the point where the soul must engage, it must struggle to find out what is really true. So this big climax of this fight essentially has to come. It's all symbolic of what goes on within us. So, Arjuna asked Krishna to bring his chariot between the two opposing armies, and then he has qualms of conscience because he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to fight, because all of his enemies and friends and family are on the other side, and he still has to fight. So so he doesn't know what to do. So the Gita is a story which is why we've got this course and bringing it together with the Gospel of John and the Tanjira's Yoga Sutras. It's instruction on how we can live in the world, because we have to engage in the world and struggle against material nature. So there's gnosis, which is a link between the soul and spirit and individuality. So these components relate to our sevenfold framework of the human being, which is physical, etheric, or the superphysical component of the physical realm, emotions, mind, which is in Hindu tradition twofold lower and higher, our intuition, and our spirit and atomic level. Now, the correspondence in the Gospel of John is here. So you have the crowds or the masses, which are ruled by anything, their emotions and desires and all the rest of it. You have the Pharisees, which are the lower mind. So everything for them is the letter of the law. Everything is about mind. They cannot see anything deeper. So, and there's lots of quotes in the Gospel of John in terms of the Pharisees and the lawyers and the rules and the regulations. They're at that really lower mind level. The word, which symbolizes intelligence, in Greek, which is the logos, is that having that insight or conscience. Then you have the disciples, which are akin to Arjuna, so they're acquiring to live the life which is a spiritual life, to go and follow their own inner calling, or follow the Christ, as it were. Now, John the Baptist symbolizes the link between Christ and the disciples, because he was the first person to recognize the Christ when he came and saw the dove rest on his head. And there's a saying in the gospel where, he's not even fit to tie the sandals, the one that is going to be the Christ and baptize you with fire, because he baptizes with water. So he symbolizes intuition, the link between our individuality, our soul, and the spirit, which is Christ. So that's some of the framework and the characters in each of the two texts relative to our constitution of the human being in the theosophical framework. So, Buddhi Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita has 4 components: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So we're going to look at Karma Yoga tonight. And I've got a quote there from chapter 2, where Krishna is advising some of the teaching, his guidance he's giving to Arjuna, that he needs to engage in Buddhi Yoga, which is the yoga of awareness, so he can be free from the bondage of action, which is what Karma Yoga actually is. So essentially, we have to be integrated in life. And the essence of Karma Yoga is to be able to act without any attachment to the outcome. So essentially, it is looking at the right actor. So Arjuna doesn't know how to act. So Krishna has to teach him yoga, which entails the whole aspect of Buddhi Yoga, before he can make a sacrifice of his own self-interest to therefore engage in Dharma, which is responsibility for the maintenance of order. We had these definitions on the first night of our introduction. Because if we are to maintain order and do the bidding of something sacred that's in us or above us, in the Christian tradition, the Christ says, "Not my will, but thy will be done." And Arjuna at the end of the Gita says, "I will do thy bidding." So if we're to follow and do what is best according to our conscience, something more subtler and higher in us, then we need to be integrated. We need to be able to engage in yoga, which will enable us to make a sacrifice of our self-interest to do what's required of us. So what Krishna is teaching Arjuna is to be a right actor. So it's how we do stuff, not what we do in any particular moment. They can be doing the dishes or whatever it is. Like Krishnamurti, who was, quite a switched-on sage, people used to say, "Well, why do you hang around this guy?" He says, "Well, I just want someone." This is what Ravi Ravindra, my teacher, who knew Krishnamurti for 20 years. Someone said, "Well, I just want to watch how he ties his shoes, how he does stuff, because he's awake." Similarly, Gurdjieff was the same. He was very awake, and all the people around him, described him. He was totally alert and would pick you up if you were being egotistical in any particular way. So there's this term, Naishkamya, which is state of freedom from action in the midst of activity. So as we saw last week, it's the gunas, the body, the forces of nature act, but we don't do anything. The self doesn't do anything. The spirit observes, and matter undertakes activity based on that spirit directive. So this is Chinese expression, right? The sage does nothing, but nothing is left undone. So our goal is to be able to engage in sacred action that doesn't lead to the bondage of action. So can we do what needs to be done without any attachment to it? Because normally, if we're operating from a rajasic point of view, we want an outcome, we want the fruits of action. But ultimately, we have to act from a sattvic perspective, which takes us beyond thought to do what's required without any self-interest. And that's the trick, or that's the practice of karma yoga. So there's a saying, it's not freedom for myself, but freedom from myself. So, for example, can we let life work through us and realize that there's the gunas, the bodies, the forces of nature acting through this body, but not getting attached? That is the key. So this is what Krishna calls yajna karma, action undertake a sacrifice in the service of the sacred and with the participation of non-egoistic energies can be free of bondage. So here Krishna is talking about the gunas, which we looked at last week. And there's a saying, just the gunas work among the gunas. The body will do what it needs to do. We can be detached. I mean, if we think about it, we can say, well, this is what I was thinking. I've observed my thoughts. I've observed my actions. I've observed my feelings. So if we look at it, we're not actually those feelings. We can be detached. That consciousness is something else. So we can be detached and do what needs to be done without getting involved. And that is the key. So yajna karma is being able to do whatever we need to do in terms of doing it for something higher, something sacred than ourselves, whatever it may be at whatever level, you know. So in a sense, it's like, you know, you're like my colleagues, it's like, oh, Friday, great, the weekend, you know, not at work. Or Monday, oh no, how was your weekend? It's not good, back to work Monday. So it's about attitude. It doesn't matter whether it's Friday at work, Monday at work, the weekend, it's all got to be the same. Obviously, you need to have a break. You can't work 24/7. But it's like Warren Buffett, he's very happy, right? He goes to work every day. It's like, you know, if you find a job you love, you never have to work a day in your life, that kind of thing. He's super happy. So whatever we're doing, we've got to get out of this mindset, if you like, well, you know, this is great today, but it's not so great tomorrow, or vice versa, whatever it might be. So irrespective of Friday, Monday, or the weekend, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you know, we're at peace. We're not comparing or thinking, well, this is good compared to this is not good, whatever activity we're doing. So action is about doing whatever is required. You know, I do the dishes a lot, right? That's part of my marital duties. Now, I've sat at a sink for the same sink for a long time. These are dishpan hands, right? I've noticed the change over 16 years of doing the dishes at the sink for sushi. You know, it's fascinating. I used to think, oh man, I wish I had a dishwasher, you know. But now it's like I just get into it and it's just like a dream and they're over in no time because you're focused, attentive, not worrying about where you could be doing something else. Which is not to say technology is not good. I mean, washing machines are really great compared to the 19th century, washing all that stuff by hand, you know. So technology has its advantages, but it's how you do stuff. So can we do it without any sense for me getting some return? So here, in terms of wanting, Arjuna asked Krishna, well, why do people do wrong? Why do we do wrong? It's because of the Rajas guna, desire and anger causes us to do wrong. So we want an outcome, and if we don't get it, you know, God help you, you know, I'll do everything I can to actually get what I want. So there's this term here, karma bandhana, so the bondage of action. So if whatever we do for self-interest and outcome, we're still going to be bound. And this is what the Buddha says, right? Get off the wheel of birth and rebirth, because this is karma. If we do it for self-interest, good or bad, then we're going to come back because we have to reap the results. So the key is to do it for the one, yajna karma, and therefore we don't actually have any personal involvement, and therefore we don't generate karma, good or bad. So we don't have to come back. So eventually it's like the car with the petrol. It eventually runs out of petrol and the motor stops. That's it. Because every day, the analogy is, if we're acting for self-interest, it's we're all doing it for our own desires, which is analogous to putting petrol back into the car. We keep refilling the car and the motor keeps running. We've just got to let the petrol run out and the motor will stop and the I is gone. So Ravi wrote me a little, he wrote this last comment here, offering our action to Krishna, mindful of our deepest self, without expectation, without self-occupation, struggling without agitation. He wrote that in you can read and write Sanskrit. He wrote that in a little inscription for me in my book, one of his books that he wrote, struggle without agitation. Keep on with the work, the practice. Okay. Right, so what I'm going to do now is look at the correspondence in terms of karma yoga, in terms of Patanjali's. So I'm basically doing a correspondence, if you like, correlation between what Krishna is saying and then what Patanjali is saying, because he gives specific practices to help us engage in yajna karma, help us actually behave without self-interest. Now, this is also, so there's two key components we have to think about, which is practice and dispassion. And Krishna also talks about it in the Bhagavad Gita. So in our daily life, and whatever we're doing from moment to moment, there's the positive aspect and there's the negative aspect, if you like, the masculine and the feminine. So we focus on the practice. For example, when negative thoughts arise, the opposite should be cultivated, according to Patanjali. And the feminine, or the negative, if you like, is being detached and letting it go. So it's being dispassionate. Something might come, and you let it go, and you put your energy somewhere else. So it's a twofold process, two sides of the same coin. We're focusing on our practice and at the same time letting go what is not conducive to our practice in terms of negative thoughts, emotions, all of that. So it's a kind of, it takes a lot of energy at the same time to be focusing on one's positive and letting go of the negative. And this is what Ali told us when she talked about Buddhi, and what his father told him, to wait 24 hours before he responds if he's angry. Just to be detached, to be very dispassionate. So there are two teachings from Patanjali in terms of what's called the yamas, or self-restraints, and the niyamas, or the right observances, which we'll go through in a moment. And Ravi says, real conscience is related with higher feelings and consciousness with higher intelligence. So the more we have, understand our nature, the more we're going to be able to embody and behave in terms of more higher feelings in line with higher intelligence. Okay. So the quote here is the yamas, the self-restraints, of which there are 5. Okay, so first is ahimsa, or non-violation. So this is, there's non-manipulation, non-interference, and it can be many things. For example, you can use force, but without the use of violence. So Arjuna, as a warrior in this story in the Bhagavad Gita, he is fighting, he's doing what needs to be done, but without any sense of violence in a self-interest way. He has to do what he will fight, but he's doing it from a sense of it's Krishna's will, so it's no longer personal. It's no longer violent from a personal perspective. It's force. So it comes down to motive. So in a sense, there's no, there's absence of anger, there's peace, there's loyalty, compassion. All of that can be done in whatever we're doing. Then there's truthfulness, which is sincerity and authenticity at many levels. So in terms of having that truth or understanding or insight, those who know about God say nothing. Like Ramana just remained silent. He didn't engage in arguments. Again, similarly, in the gospel, it talked about the Christ. He was one who spoke with authority and not as the scribes do. So if you actually have some degree of truth and understanding and insight, which is an ordered state of being through effort, which is tapas, then you are able to speak with authority and sincerity. Non-stealing, and this includes not only obvious, theft in the normal sense as we understand it, but opportunities as well. You withhold or stop someone getting an opportunity that they deserve, that's considered as theft, no matter what argument you put upon it. Taking something that is not, due to you, a privilege, without making payment for it. So Ravi, my teacher, said, those who receive more is expected. So if we actually have some insight, then we're expected to give that back. So as Meister Eckhart say, what we receive in contemplation, we give out in love. So all sages have an obligation to give back. And I think it's the Rig Veda says we're all, or might be from the Upanishads actually, we're all born, humans are born with obligations to the gods, to our family, to the devas. Until we pay those obligations, we are stealing, as it were. So non-stealing is to be able to give when needs to be given, not take when something is not yours. And there's a quote here from the Gita, chapter 3, 10 to 12. Foster the gods with yajna, sacrifice, as they foster you. By nourishing each other, you will attain supreme good. Fostered by yajna, the gods will bestow on you the joys you cherish. Those who enjoy the gifts of the gods without giving to them in return are verily thieves. So that was chapter 3, verse 10 to 12. Okay, containment, which is commonly known as brahmacharya, which literally means dwelling in the vastness. So whilst it's commonly understood with sex, it's at a higher level because actually it's pride, which is one of the first ones where humans fall, as opposed to sex or anything like that. So it's about insight, being at whatever level we're self-interested in, can we come back and just dwell in the vastness and be content with that, free from any insight. It's interesting, Madame de Salzman talked about this. She said this in terms of which is basically, I'll just quote it where she says, work takes a lot of sexual energy. When it is needed, it will be taken. Sex energy can be used in the work, but only when one is very advanced. At present, do nothing about it. Otherwise, one can do something wrong. It is like food and drink. The body needs it and wants it is quite right. So it's all about use of energies. So brahmacharya, dwelling in the vastness, is about the use of energies, mentally, physically, and emotionally, all of that combined. Then we've got non-grasping, So this is possession, psychological and physical. Yeah, so trying to control oneself, manipulate somebody, hold goods, power, knowledge over them, that is not good. And it's again being aware in our daily life how the social forces impact us. A lot of, advertising, marketing, encourages us to engage in all sorts of stuff, Coke, etc. Everything. So can we not be so grasping, not to understand it within ourselves of how this energy is operating, this component of ourselves. Okay. So now the niyamas, so the right observances. So there's purity of mind, cheerfulness, mastery of the senses, one-pointedness, and the ability for self-realization follow. So it's again focusing on the practice, emphasizing heart, for example. Kabir, who said, Indian mystic and poet, said, ages have passed turning the beads, but turning the heart has not occurred. Put aside the beads of the hand and turn the beads of the heart. So again, it's about that purity and going within and combining mind and heart. Contentment leads to unsurpassed joy. So it's no longer hankering after the trinkets of the world or whatever, or even of the inner life, wanting to, be on the right-hand side of God or whatever it might be. It is actually just being content with what we have, where we are. Because the Rajasic guna is always wanting more, desire, and it can never be satiated. So it's just being still and being content with what we have, which is not to say whatever situation you find oneself is, if it isn't aligned to your inner being, you stay there, you work to evolve and change. I mean, I've changed careers 3 or 4 times in my life, so it's not sitting there automatically just thinking, oh, this is my lot. It's actually having a very focused self-awareness. Self-discipline. So this is, effort, essentially, being able to practice and engage in the work, doing whatever you need to do, meditation, exercise, study, some service, all of that. Also self-study, going within, because someone once said, rather than reading books, I read the book that is myself. I think I read that somewhere. Essentially, it's knowing oneself, being aware, knowing ourselves innately. What does Socrates say? Know thyself. And then dedication to the one, Ishvara. So again, it's having that dedication to the one. Ramana Maharshi talks about it in terms of self-surrender to the one, to God. So those 3 combined, self-discipline, self-study, and dedication to Ishvara, symbolize Kriya Yoga, which is the activity of yoga. So we have to actually engage in practice. Now, what Patanjali also talks about in chapter 2, verse 35 to 45, he talks about the practice of yama and niyama leads to many benedictions. So, for example, in the presence of one who is established in ahimsa, there is a cessation of hostility. When one abides in truthfulness, actions result in their desired end. When one is established in non-stealing, riches present themselves freely. When brahmacharya is established, great vigor is obtained. When one is established in non-grasping, there is the knowledge of the nature and purpose of existence. And purity leads to non-identification with one's body and to a freedom from the need for contact with others. Purity of mind, cheerfulness, and mastery of the senses, one-pointedness, and the ability for self-realization follow. contentment leads to unsurpassed joy, etc. So these are the outcomes that Patanjali outlines for us in terms of applying these practices, which essentially relate to karma yoga, and doing sacrificial yoga, yajna karma. It's an emphasis on the how. Now, he also talks about asana and pranayama. So I'm making this correlation as well because it relates to karma yoga, because it's actions you can undertake, we can undertake. Now, asana is right alignment. Now, it's not only the physical. If you do hatha yoga, you're doing those asanas, or tai chi is a type of asana, if you like, whatever that physical activity that's beneficial for your health. But it's also mentally and emotionally. There's alignment within as well, the right alignment with the self, with the one. So there's a flow of energies from within and without. And if we aren't integrated, if we're being ruled by the gunas, being ruled by our material nature, there's no alignment. And therefore we can't really connect with anything deeper within ourselves, emotionally, mentally, or physically. And the French word for posture is attitude. So again, it's an attitude, if you like, of how to live. Madame de Salzman, she emphasized bodily posture as well, where she said, higher energy is there, but cannot come down unless the body is available and in equilibrium without tension. So she used to tell Ravi Ravindra, even if his foot was out of alignment in the practices, he would not make that connection with something deeper. Similarly, in co-freemasonry, you have alignment in terms of the symbology of angles and that. So there is this emphasis on alignment within and without. And this is what Ravi was saying. More vigilance is needed to guard the inner temple so that the marauding forces of stray thoughts do not invade the sanctuary, causing a deviation from the true inner form and outer posture. When there's right alignment with the infinite, it is possible to let go all effort, all struggle, and all tension. So when we're at one, when we're at ease, then things flow and there's not a problem. And I was just reminded at the end of the Matrix movie, the first one, when Neo was fighting Smith at the end, he's just, he's not even trying, he's just letting it flow through him. That's what he's doing. So it's like there's no effort. It's just there, and the body will do what needs to be done, and we're at peace. With pranayama, again, it's talking about the flow of breath, which is alignment, watching our breath. I mean, Ravi said, what I said at the start of the introductory night, this body is being breathed. We don't breathe. The body is being breathed by the one. We didn't make this body. We didn't make this breath. It is just existing for something else. Now, it's interesting that Patanjali doesn't elaborate on a lot of breathing exercises because, there's lots of that stuff that the yogi sages will teach you, but he doesn't go into it for obvious reasons because it can lead to more subtle states of consciousness and awareness, which, unless you have a proper teacher beside you, it is dangerous to engage in. So, Buddhi yoga is a combination of 4 yogas. And in terms of practice, Patanjali outlines a series, which is his first 4 limbs of yoga: self-restraints, observances, right alignment, and breath. And practice and dispassion are the keys to self-transformation at each moment, focusing on what is positive and letting go of what is negative at the same time. So yeah, a lot of stuff. Great. Okay. Any comments, questions, thoughts?
Who said life without struggle is meaningless?
Well, I don't know if anyone has said it's meaningless. I mean, it is meaningful in the sense that it's how we actually grow, you know. I remember once there was a story in an article, this old timer parents died, left him lots of money. He spent all his life cruising on ships. He died basically. There was an article on this guy. He never had any worries. And it's like, he might have been happy, but did he really evolve? I mean, so the idea of struggle is we as humans can wake up to some degree and change. It's like nature. At the start, the image I have on the start of the study course each week is the monarch butterfly it's come out of the cocoon. So it's that struggle. Like they've done experiments and stuff, and kids have, helped it to get out of the cocoon when it's coming out of, when it's, developed and grown, and it has to come out. You've got to let it struggle because that develops its wings. Right? So I can only give that analogy, or if anyone else has got some analogy from nature, same for human beings. We in incarnation struggle because we have these forces within us, the manifestation, forces of involution, and there's the forces of evolution. So our goal, if we want to do it, if we want to just kick back and relax and not do anything, that's fine, no problem. And it will take a long time for us to wake up. But if we want to struggle and say, okay, I'm going to actually look at this knowledge, theosophy, the divine wisdom. How does it apply to me? I'll look at these frameworks and I'll go, okay, I really have to do something and change because there's something deeper than what I think I really am. There's something more than what I am at this particular point in time. But if I want to pierce through the cloud of unknowing, which we talked about a couple of sessions ago, then I actually have to work for it. I have to practice, I have to engage, which requires struggle. Because what humans are doing by undertaking any spiritual practice is struggling against their own natural tendencies, which is fine. We're born with natural tendencies. If we want to, it's like in the Christian tradition, in the gospel, they talk about metanoia, which is for self-repentance, essentially. But it's a radical reorientation. We're redirecting, reorientating our energies of how we've normally behaved in the past, how we can change and behave in the future. And that is the struggle. So we don't have to do it. No one has to do it. But what's life going to be like? Are we going to learn anything? I mean, in our work, in our relationships, whatever it might be, is an opportunity to change levels. We can stay at the vertical level we're on, or you be yoked up the vertical axis of being, which is symbolized in the cross, to go to a deeper level of awareness. And that's the quest of the spiritual challenge, of the spiritual life. That is the challenge we have, to move to a different level of insight and understanding.
And that struggle could be across lives.
Yes, absolutely.
And would you agree that the forces that are drawn in was backlight were essentially those of animalism?
Yeah, so Gareth is asking about the forces and struggle in terms of animalistic natures of the human being. Because look, in terms of the theosophical framework, we have the consciousness coming through the kingdoms of nature. So you have the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, human kingdom, and then you have the superhuman kingdom, where you become perfect. You learn all there is to be human. So yes, humans are halfway between animals and gods, as it were. So we are struggling against those animalistic tendencies within us. But ultimately, from life to life, if you take the idea of reincarnation, whatever we do in this moment, today, in this incarnation, we've got it forever. It's never lost. And if you think about it logically, from yesterday to today, we're pretty much the same person, unless you went out on the grog and woke up with a big fat headache. You're going to be under the weather today. Apart from that, the logic is the same. Nature, whatever we've done today, we start tomorrow where we left off. From Monday to Tuesday, from this life to next life. Same logic. So nothing is ever lost. Our efforts are always with us. And, Krishna and all the sages say it. Whatever work we do, it's with us forever. Whatever awakening we have, that's it. That's the law, nature. That's how it is. Okay. I'll answer a couple more in the live, and I'll come to online. Okay, Chris? Here's me.
My struggle in life has been to change my ego. And every time I do something, my ego pops up. It tells me how to do it, and why it's good for me to do it, do whatever it is this way and that. And ultimately, once I know through the readings and actually the training I've had, that once I've overcome the ego, then I will find freedom. It's on the whole life.
Yeah, so Isma is saying throughout her life, it's about taming the ego, pops up, and essentially when that's not there, you have peace. And that's the whole point. It's the whole transformation, the whole change from being self-orientated to not freedom for oneself, but freedom from oneself. And that is the shift. So, yeah. I can't hear you.
You also say you want. You say something in the one stage can be this and in of this.
So is it becoming peaceful, blissful?
Yes, people who get on stage is wasting breath. Yeah. So the answer can be to actually legal. Great answer can be legal. And legal can be
Okay. Yeah. So about being positive. Oh, about material. Yeah, so material.
Basically like about animals, being animals, human being.
That's what it was like.
Yeah. Please refer to that. Saying how you could negative things that you've done in your life, you can actually learn from them, and they can actually be a blessing and stuff.
Yeah, so learning from all your experiences and animalistic tendencies. Okay, Miles, and then I'll go on to online, okay? I can't hear you, sorry. Yeah, Miles is emphasizing the animalistic natures, eating, sleeping, mating, things like that. What's that? Yeah, there's some t-shirt, right? A kiwi eats root, shoots and leaves. That's the kind of thing, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's all of that stuff. But there's more to the human being than that. That's the whole point of any spiritual tradition, right? Okay, Chris, I'll go to you online.
Oh, yes. Am I unmuted? Yes. Simon, I just wanted to, I think that I heard one of the students there ask really what was the point of understanding what you've been talking about tonight. And I just want to say that speaking as a student of many years, it's still very challenging for me to really get my head around this very esoteric knowledge. I've made a lot of notes tonight because I will read them again later and ponder. And I love the word ponder. It's a very old-fashioned word. But what I'm going to suggest is that when we make an effort, the effort required to try and get your head around this stuff in itself is very valuable, because even though you may not become aware of how that might assist your progress, it will be happening. It's that discipline that's required when you struggle to try and understand. It's actually of great benefit to you. We shouldn't expect to kind of witness our progress, but it will be happening. So that's all I would like to say.
Yeah, no, very good, Chris. I mean, the Mahatma leaders talk about that. It's always not visible on the outward level, the physical level, but inwardly things are really happening. So yeah. And then one day you'll realize you're like, what? I know something maybe. Yeah. Anyone else online? Yeah, so it's fascinating in the sense that how we live, we can live differently. And we can live in a way that's more peaceful, where we're not caught up in the outcomes of what we're actually doing. And this is what Krishna is talking about with karma yoga. Do it for the one, because we're all one, even though at this level, physically, we're all separate, but at the deepest level, we're one. So do it for that reason. And then we're out of the way. It's like, you know, and that's the trick. So what Patanjali was saying and covered in terms of the yamas and the niyamas, the gunas from last week, and the mind before that, the week before, the human condition, it tells you, we were trying to get at how we get caught up, how we're in jail. Because then when we know how we're in jail, we can just unlock the door and get out. Miles.
The biggest society, that I see the process of being detached from the results of work. They see that as like a duty, like in the Bible, there's Christians duty, those are these things that more of a
So Miles is asking him, it's about acting in the world as a duty, and a moral imperative in terms of that. Yeah. So dharma literally means, in terms of the Sanskrit translation, it can mean duty, it can mean a lot of things, but Ravi, my teacher, said it's a responsibility for the maintenance of order. So there's a reciprocal relationship between ourselves and the one, the divine. So if we can do whatever we need to do in terms of our conscience, we're maintaining order because we're not having self-interest. So you do what you need to do, and obviously there'll be some benefit. There's a Japanese saying, you know, the human being who rows his fellow human being across the river self eventually arrives, you know. So doing whatever we need to do in terms of our conscience, and you know, Krishna says it's better to follow one's own law of conscience and perfectly carried out than to follow the law of conscience of another perfectly carried out. So you've got to do what you feel is right, and everything will be fine no matter what the world might say. Because you know, you have a lot of people who, you know, can quote all the rules under the sun and think they've done the right thing, but in terms of spirit, they're totally right off mark, you know. But on their deathbeds, we'll all find out, because there is no personality, no delusion of personality on Yuan's deathbed. No codes of conduct, no constitution, no rules. That's it. You're face to face, no lawyers. You're face to face with yourself, one, and it ain't gonna be pretty if you haven't. Yeah, but if you.
It's no judgment. I mean, you just one of the achievements by teaching oneself more than the way we are now, or how we think about it. I mean, there's no judgment on your deathbed either, you know, it's safe on half that one. So what I'm thinking about what's right, what's wrong, and our concern and anxiety about our state of our soul and whether we measured up or not. I think it holds us back. You know, and to sort of without fear, you know, put something like an ancient way. It is not worry so much about self-improvement, because that if we don't start accepting ourselves as we are, we don't
you don't get any. You know, you are who you are. And, you know, people have troubles thinking things of themselves. They know how they've been treated badly by others. And self-acceptance can be a starting point to self-love. Can be a starting point to whatever else you want to do. But if you think badly of yourself, someone will put you down or something. I don't know that you can't get over something to just be okay with this and think that you're. Yeah, not the judgment, and then it's nothing comes into your life, and then you start maybe relax. I don't think you can be with them. I think we're relying on for that. You want to think of the water. I think it's a little bit of an easy time. I think that might have been what we were doing.
Not really at all, to be honest.
Oh, I don't see that. You think struggle, you know, that I'm pretty sure. See, and that I would not learn about you see. I realize we have things that we find to challenge this struggle. But I don't think that our should do.
Okay,
So,
did everyone online hear what Louise said?
No.
Okay, all right. So Louise said quite a lot, but essentially she's saying acceptance of ourselves as we are. We don't really have to get into judgment of this is right or this is wrong on our deathbed is what we've done. Basically, accept where we are, what we're doing, how we're living, and try not to beat ourselves up too much, in one sense.
ourselves.
Accept ourselves without torturing ourselves and just getting on with life. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have a look at the chat just a moment. There's a couple of comments in the chat. Oh, okay, which Nalanda really enjoyed comparison of the Gita, Theosophy, and the Sutras. Thank you very much. Valentina, yes, thank you. Got to learn and practice, yeah. So I'll put this up on the YouTube in the next day or so. Sushma is back, as you know, and she sends everyone her best wishes. She's a bit jet lagged. I did try and encourage her to come tonight to say hello to you all, but she's a bit jet lagged, so she'll be here next week. But I've been putting up the technology. I followed her instructions to the law. And it was good. That's my wife, those of you who don't know. Yeah, Vikas, great Vikas, thank you. Yeah, so it's about how we live and what we do. And if we, what did Ravi say? To be on the way, but to be out of the way. So if we can keep out of the way and not be too egotistical and watch how we get tripped up, my way or the highway, I'm really not going to listen to you and put my head in the sand. You know, it's Rajasic, Tamasic. Well, okay, let's have a look at this. Let's be honest and open and try and get to the truth. More sattvic view, you know. If we can be aware of how we think and how we behave in terms of some of the teachings of these three texts, then we're in pretty good stead. Okay. Oh, Brett, yep. Which one? Oh, with the 7 planes of nature?
Yeah.
I made that myself. So, yeah. Okay, Sue, great, thanks. Excellent. Thanks, Edward. Yeah, so, Dean, got a question, yeah.
I was just thinking, it's quite, I was brought up to do my best and whatever, you know, that's why I was brought up. And because it takes a while to find direction and what you want to put your best into, but you know when it's right for you. And it might be wrong for most other people, but you know, you've got to pursue it, and spiritually or physically or whatever. And so that's the way. But sometimes you get discerned and you question things anyway. So that's how you're right. It's happening to the cycle.
Yeah.
for your vest on. But apart from that, this society at the moment with all the technology and stuff, it's really confusing so many people. They don't know where to go, I think. And they're getting quite stressed by it because they have a search for things out there spiritually. And there's so much information changing daily virtually on the physical side of energy and all that stuff, but people that don't really understand a lot of it just don't know where to go. And it's good to have time out of it. And that's what I'm at the moment, taking time out from all the expectations of that.
Did you guys hear that online?
No.
Okay. Oh, okay. So Dean was saying about essentially following your nose, going within, inquiring, changing, thinking, taking some time out just to go within and do what you feel is right, even though it may not be what everyone else thinks is right. But follow your own law, as it were. Doing what's right and inquire. Great. Because that's all there is at the end of the day. Because we are responsible for our own actions.
Liberty balance.
Hey?
Remember liberty balance? But the point of a gun was the only law that liberty balance.
Oh yeah, that's right. Western song. Yeah. Brett.
Dean's fear of the information, disinformation that's available, and well, that's where the TS really comes in, and especially with this sort of engagement with the modern media and that sort of thing, what you're providing here, as an access way for people to get clearer information.
Yeah. Brett was talking about all of the media, social media, and all the information, internet, and all that. You've got to sift wheat from the chaff there. But in terms of what we're providing with Theosophy and our programs, it enables people to, look at some information and find the truth for themselves. And the whole point, and this is what the Mahatmas said, of bringing this knowledge out into the world publicly for the first time under one roof. And obviously a lot of other organizations have spread from the formation of the TS and the knowledge, Theosophy, is for us, it's for the purpose of helping us and changing our lives. I mean, this body put in 7 months to put all this course together. I hope I'm doing it justice, but it's because I can see the relevance. It's like, if we actually apply it, we can live peacefully and happily, and that's what it's all about. Human beings can live differently. We don't have to live in terms of being animalistic. So that's the beautiful thing. And this is what the Mahatmas want. They want a universal brotherhood of humanity. They want a new society, a new community based on unity of consciousness, of which they are experiencing directly and at their deepest level. And that's our task, to come into their world. And they put their forces through this place for 106 years. This energy has been flowing through this building in this spot. There's a nice energy here. Okay. Thanks, team. So I'll officially close tonight's session.